Inside this tank is a bunch of old heating oil. So today, as you probably guessed, I want to talk about oil tanks in your yard, what to do when they go bad.
You do vertical 2 feet from the middle, then it's not, you know.
Gotcha.
Hi. Hey, this is Don Francis with EcoTech, and we're talking about decommissioning an oil tank. Now, a lot of times when people either convert to natural gas or they have some problem or they're selling the house, they find they may have an issue with their tank.
Yes.
So what are you guys doing here today?
Well, today we're decommissioning this tank. They're cutting the top of the tank open right now, and once they get it open, they'll check the atmosphere of the tank, make sure it's safe to breathe in it.
Alright, slightly low oxygen and not too much carbon monoxide.
And then Tony will be putting on a full suit and a respirator, setting up a tripod in case something happens to him, we can get him out of there. And then he'll go into the tank and actually physically remove the solid materials and residual liquids. Take those out of the tank and then clean the interior of the tank.
Wow. So what do you guys do when you come out here? You mentioned this is a real estate transaction, so first there's testing?
Yeah, usually the buyer oftentimes will pay for soil samples as part of their inspection process to find out if the tank has leaked. And then if it hasn't and the tank's been abandoned, then they usually want to have it decommissioned. If it has leaked, then they want to have the seller pay for some form of a cleanup so it can be closed with the DEQ. Because when the tanks leak, DEQ is notified and they have it on the bad guy list, and so usually the buyer wants to make sure that it's no longer on the bad guy list, if you will, the property, and have it taken care of. When tanks leak, DEQ says you have one of two options. One is either remove the contaminated soil, which means you have to take the tank out to get to the contaminated soil, or alternatively, you can do a soil investigation, a risk assessment, and if it passes muster, you can actually leave the contaminated soil in the ground and then decommission the tank. Basically, decommissioning means to put the tank in a situation where it's not going to leak anything out of it. It's not going to collapse if you have, like a car driving over the top of it. The tank is cleaned out, get all the oil out of it, all the sludge and residual stuff out of it, and then fill it with like a fine sand or a pea gravel or cement slurry or something like that. And then cut off the fill pipe and the vent pipe so that nobody ever puts oil in that tank again.
Okay. Now you mentioned expense. How much does something like this cost?
Average decommissioning is probably somewhere between $600 and $1,200. They're usually under $1,000. And then there's some cases where you have to remove the contaminated soil, or most of it, because groundwater is at risk or groundwater is contaminated and there's a risk to drinking water. And in those cases, then you're removing contaminated soil, and those costs can get pretty high. Far and few between, but they're out there.
If you want more information about oil tanks, well, the DEQ's got a pretty good website. You can find it at oregon.gov/DEQ.